We're talking on short-circuiting the stress response today. Does anybody have any idea how excited this guy was to find that graphic? I delight in the small things in life, and that lit my fuse for about 15 minutes straight. So we're going to talk a little bit about the stress response, and there's 3 different types of stress we're going to discuss here today, and then 5 interventions. But I do have the teacher's pet. Of the 5 interventions, there's one that's the favorite, so hang on for that. It's coming at the end. 3 different types of stress. The first one is physical stress. So we think of jobs that impart physical stress, especially in my work as a chiropractor, helping people structurally. When I see somebody bending forward like the gentleman in the middle of that picture, I think, I wish he'd stop doing that. That's not great for his discs. But in general, physical stress is something that there are a lot of health-giving benefits to. In fact, if we give advice to individuals who have low bone density, one of the factors that we bring into play is that we tell them to stress their body, to stress the bones. The proliferation and health that comes from that is very positive. Chemical stress is the second type. And with chemical stress, we can impart this on ourselves. I've done this before on a Friday night. We can do this on a regular, I don't do it often, don't judge. We can do this on a regular basis with over-the-counter drugs, pharmaceutical entities, just entities that we want to clear from our system. Our liver takes care of this when in doubt. If you've ever taken a multiple choice test regarding the human body, guess liver if you don't know the answer because it's right. Over 500 processes. But the liver's got this covered for us. So when these factors come into play, the pollution that's in our environment and so forth. I'm not going to be Danny Downer up here today, but the liver's got us covered if we support it with proper nutrition. Another talk I won't go into right now. Mental emotional stress is what we're going to focus on here today. So of the 3 different types, physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress, when we say, are you impacted by stress, most of us then go to this. This is what we're thinking of, okay? And some of the connections of mental emotional stress and the resultant effects on the body are what we're going to focus on here today. So with technology, the way it is now, even somebody who's a neophyte in technology, I have my hands on a screen almost constantly, okay? And the incredible capacity that our brain possesses, especially compared to our closest primate relatives, the incredible computing capacity our brain processes can be used for our benefit or it can work against us. And with technology, there's plenty of opportunities to get sidetracked and bring stress into our lives. So let's talk a little bit about this. The ball and chain style feeling that can come from the modern world can be interrupted. So let's talk about some of the ways that are very effective in interrupting this cycle. I like this graphic because it shows a continuum, effectively 180 degrees opposed. We've got stress. Yeah, we've got stress over here, and wellness the complete opposite direction. Now, there is such thing as beneficial stress, right? We think of eustress, EU-stress, as being a positive thing. And it can be a motivating factor. When I step up in front of a room with this brain power, that's a motivating factor I want to deliver for you all. That's a positive aspect of stress. If I would have stayed up all night working on my seminar, that would be distress, and that's what we want to knock out. So wellness and stress, we're talking about distress, is the complete opposite of wellness, okay? We want to avoid distress. So 5 factors to keep stress in check. The first one is sleep. Anybody who's heard me talk before, you've probably heard, I've got 3 rules for sleep. Got to get the quantity that we need, 6 to 8 hours a night. Got to get the quality that we need. That means that we're asleep early enough in the process that when our body kicks in the circadian rhythm, at midnight you want to be pretty darn relaxed, meaning asleep by at least an hour, maybe 2 hours. So we've got timing. And then the quality of sleep is also impacted by screen time. This is the single biggest factor. It's impacted by a wide variety of things, but screen time is the single biggest factor that we can change in order to bring an improvement here. And just the brief input on this is that most of the screens we stare at have a certain frequency, wavelength of light that has blue in it. Even if you're looking at a screen that doesn't appear blue to you, there's blue light coming from that. And in the middle of the day, around noon, on a sunny day, your eyes are being bombarded outside by quite a lot of blue light. And so melatonin is released in our bodies in order to help us reach levels of deep restful sleep. When you're staring at a computer screen and it excites the neurons within the central nervous system in such a way that your body believes that you're in midday sunlight, we can see how that could be disruptive to sleep cycles. So I like to buffer sleep time by at least an hour okay? Ideally an hour and a half from my last exposure to the screen, okay? I'm not going to have people raise their hands as to how many times your head's been on a pillow with a screen in front of you, because I'm guilty also here. But just keep this in mind. The quality component's huge. You know I'm going to talk about nutrition and hydration. You know I am. And you know I'm going to talk about kale if I talk about nutrition. So I'm not going to make you listen to that. I know many of you how you feel about kale. Kale. Good stuff. All hail the kale. But hydration is incredibly important. This is huge. And our caffeine habit in this country and worldwide is something that can tend to dehydrate us. So just remember, for each cup of coffee or green tea, be sure to be hydrating for that. Okay, great to buffer stress. Nothing happens in our body. No enzymatic processes happen in our body without the fluid medium of water to carry them through. We have to hydrate. So crucial. Exercise. This is huge. And there are better ways of exercising and less favorable ones, but the bottom line is find the type that works for you and get out and do it, because exercise at any level is better than passing it up. And what we now know is strength training and high energy outputs over short durations tend to bring about the best responses, okay? So if you can do really vigorous exercise, 75 to 80% of your maximum heart rate, for about 10 to 15 minutes, that's fantastic. This isn't to throw out cardio, and Scott's not here today, but keep running the marathons, Scott. But at the end of the day, high output, short duration is incredibly, incredibly health-giving. Relaxation, this is huge. Think of vacation time, but also think of, as long as you're a better golfer than me, think of any process that brings about a relaxation response. I've got my 3 Gs. I've got my girls. This is not like Don Draper's girls, you know. My girls, my girlfriend, and my 6-year-old girl. The second one is green tea, and the third one's guitar. Give me my 3 Gs. Oh, and meditation. Well, that's coming up later. So mindfulness. And this is the teacher's pet, okay? This is really where the rubber meets the road. Buddhist monks have known it all along. We're getting savvy now. So let's talk about these 5 factors to keep stress in check, and then, of course, my favorite, number 5. Not that the 4 beforehand aren't important. Those are the pillars. And then on top of that, I want you to build a mindfulness practice and tell you how simple this can be. Mindfulness practice does not have to be 45 minutes of seated chanting. It does not have to be that. You can select your best time of day. First thing in the morning works great, or right before bed. Or if I'm firing on all cylinders, which happens some of the time, I'm doing it twice a day. This can be 5 to 15 minutes of sitting and just allowing your mind to decompress. As thoughts come up, allow them, recognize them, and then let them drift away. If you start to get focused on any one given thought, in the Eastern disciplines, this is called the monkey mind, where we get really involved with carrying through on every thought that comes. We want to avoid that. So as the thought pops up, just acknowledge it, allow it, and let it move on through. Okay? So just basic meditation. The amazing thing, I put this up here because it reminds me of neuroplasticity. Who has heard of the term neuroplasticity? I love it that that's a fairly ubiquitous term now. The concept of neuroplasticity is that our body and our brain has a capacity to shift and share the resources in terms of the way the brain and central nervous system work in ways that we didn't know of 30 years ago, okay? In fact, in basic anatomy, it was long taught that you've got what you've got after development in the womb, and there's not much change in terms of the way the brain functions. We now know that that's based on classical physics or Newtonian physics. Some great stuff. But at the end of the day, we've got a new way of thinking. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Neuroplasticity is leveraged in meditation. And I've got 3 different journals I referenced and read ad nauseum for this that were all published in the last year and a half that talk about neuroplasticity and how to leverage the response of relaxation that happens through meditation practices. Now, this was all kicked off in 1992, going back 23 years, in 1992 by a paper in the American Journal of Psychiatry, and it was called Reducing Stress. Well, here, let me tell you what it's called. Effectiveness of a meditation-based stress reduction program in the treatment of anxiety disorders. That's what it's called. 1992. Now thank you so much, Cynthia. That one paper has been cited 2,500 times since. I think they were onto something. Most of them very positive citations. But the take-home message was that, in fact, if people do employ a meditation practice, even at the worst of anxiety being very high, right? We talk of anxiety and depression as being two different sides of the same coin. And I feel comfortable sharing information because there's a lot of folks battling with one aspect of that or another. And anxiety is often just a product of a high-stress environment and diminished capacity to buffer that stress, okay? So when we look at this, that paper 23 years ago and then the 2,500 citations since speak to the importance of this. So I mentioned earlier Newtonian physics. So Sir Isaac Newton laid out some basic postulates in terms of how function happens in our physical realm, and he was right about a lot of stuff, and we're so grateful to him and all the work that's been done since. So planetary oscillations and many of the processes that are observed in the human body on the macro level are informed by Newtonian or classical physics. But what happens is when we get below the level of the atom, so as subatomic particles, classic physics doesn't continue to explain the incredible capacity that our body has in many other areas. In fact, you might have heard me say this before, if our body were a 5-gallon bucket, we know about 1 shot glass worth of material. So even with the incredible advancements in medicine and what we're able to do today, understanding that there's this whole foundation that exists below our classical physics understanding of the body is important, and we leverage this. It's best. We don't know exactly how it works yet, and probably won't in any of our lifetimes, but we know that there's an operation happening below that surface that is in fact informed as quantum physics, okay? And the quantum physics, the benefits conferred on us by a meditation practice and deep relaxation will be and are beginning to be explained by quantum physics. So what do we get when we engage a process like this and we get connectivity and quiet the mind? We get connection between the mind and the heart. I wish Stephen Hager was here. I'm talking his language with neuroscience. When we talk about this, when we're living from our heart and connecting that with our cognitive capacity and our mind, stress diminishes instantly. You can't be aligned on these two vectors and have a high stress environment. What questions do you have for me? I will start. Let me give a question that's often asked to me. Folks will say, how long do I have to do meditation in order for it to really begin to benefit me? There's a study in 2005 in a journal called Stress. There's really a medical journal called Stress. And it's a high-impact journal. 2005 study, 2015 study. It was a February of 15. And it talks about activity in the cingulate area of the brain that is observed after a short duration, a very short duration of meditation process. So if I remember right, it was less than 2 weeks. You can already get functional MRI. That's an imaging modality that shows us instantaneous change in the body. Functional MRI changes begin to show up in less than 2 weeks of a meditation process. And this is leveraging neuroplasticity, and undoubtedly the answers fall in the realm of quantum physics of understanding how this works. But the power to control our mind, our subconscious programming, and the resultant changes that can come from that are just astounding. Yes, Dale. I'd love it that you asked that question. It does, in fact, and I can just tell you my personal practice, what I do, and this has a tie-in with Dale, in fact, what I do in my personal practice is after my morning meditation, I'm going to read from one of the books for self-improvement that I have. This can be Think and Grow Rich. It can be Confidence by Dale Furtwängler. That's actually one of them. It can be The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz that I'm also regularly citing. It can be The Secret. So yes, this is fantastic. You're opening your mind. In a meditation process, you're opening your mind, and more importantly, your subconscious mind, the pilot that's really there to process the majority of information through our day. You're opening that subconscious mind through the meditation process, the initial programming that you do in your day, if it's in a supportive fashion like that, incredibly, exponentially powerful. Thank you. Yes, Les. Thank you so much, Les. He's not a plant, but that's a perfect question. That's a wonderful question. The single biggest thing you can do to intervene in the moment is breath work. okay, by breathing. We have the capacity in controlling our breathing to actually sit in the driver's seat of what's happening in our nervous system, anything electrical going on in our body, in our endocrine system, think hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, stress, the main stress hormones. So by having a breathing and a meditation process, that's ideal, you're right, for a global set. But in the moment, by having a breathing intervention that you can engage, that is absolutely the most powerful thing. And when I learned about the details of how to breathe properly, I thought, is this possible? Could I have been breathing wrong? How am I breathing wrong? And I've had... Oh, thank you. Okay, good. I knew you would ask. He's not going to. He's not going to shut up until I ask him how to breathe right. So the real trick is your abdomen's supposed to be allowed to move freely. So suck in your stomach and stand up straight. I heard that growing up. Not mean parents or anything, but somewhere I was walking around like that. So that actually impedes our ability to breathe. If you see a newborn child laying and breathing, you'll see their bellies rising and falling. And I won't go into all the physiology to it, but what happens is when the abdomen's able to move, it allows the lungs and the thoracic space to expand properly into that space, okay? Because the diaphragm, the muscle that controls that, drops downward. So the important thing with belly breathing is that you're just allowed to allow that excursion to happen. So an inhalation would look like this. An exhalation is this. And it's good to count it out. So if you inhale, I'll just do a cycle for you. This is a 15 count. There's many good ways to do it. But you do 6 seconds of inhalation. Hold for 2 seconds. And then exhale for 7. You might have heard what I was doing there. It's a technique called Ujjayi breath. It's yoga informed, but it's very simple to do. 5 cycles like that, and I'm great. When I get stressed, that intervenes beautifully. And this is the best way to jump in the driver's seat on your nervous system.
You combine your spiritual prayers with your mindfulness?
Thank you very much for asking that. I do. I choose to do that. I find it to be especially empowering to bring spirit in and nurture my soul to do that. And most of the folks I work with enjoy that. Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, and Chris. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and the cycle of breathing, the important thing there is that we've got a steady inhalation, that pause and that hold, and then a concerted effort on the exhalation. And I love that. I've heard that ratio before also. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you all so much for being so welcoming and the great questions.